Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. T Show. I am Dr. T, your host for this podcast. I want to thank you for joining me today, and I invite you to follow this show as I engage in conversations with people from all walks of life, but all with one thing in common. That common link, they have a voice with purpose. My hope in bringing you Voices with Purpose is to offer encouragement and inspiration and perhaps help you to launch your voice with purpose if you have not already done so. So be sure to check out my website to learn more, drtconsulting.org. You'll find more information and valuable resources. So my guest today is Marit Welker, who brings to the table a very vital conversation. More and more adult children are cutting off their parents. Today's guest says that everything a mother's instinct tells her to do in that moment is wrong, and she would know. Marit Welker has been on both sides of the estrangement. First with a parent, and years later, her adult child cut her off. Both relationships are happily restored. But Marit walking through fire to get there. Today, she works with Christian mothers who are navigating that silence and helping them heal, find their identity, and step into purpose and peace on a new path, one that also prepares them for the possibility of reunification. Marit is a certified life coach, a speaker on 3 continents, and the host of Still Here, a podcast for mothers walking this road. She studied scripture in Jerusalem, served as a missionary in South America, and teaches from a Christ-centered foundation informed by neuroscience and personal development. Marit, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So why don't we start here? You say a mother's instincts after being cut off will make things worse. Walk us through that, please.
Well, a mother's love doesn't fail. A mother's love, in most cases, a normal mother's love is imperfect, but it's solid. It's there. You would do anything for your child. That doesn't mean you want to put up with anything, but that still means that if push came to shove, you would be there for your child.
Absolutely.
And the problem is that with that level of mother love, when your child asks for space, sets up a boundary and pulls away and then rejects you completely, what they're saying is, leave me alone. And what a mother naturally wants to do is fix it. A mother wants to reach out and be there for her child in their child's pain. Most of all, she wants to explain it from her perspective because their child rewrote what actually happened. And they want to be able to help the child to see what's really going on. They want to apologize. They sometimes end up bargaining or trying to make deals to get their child back because they want their pain to end. They want their child back. They want their grandchildren back. And so in that case, mothers say and do the wrong thing most of the time. Here's the right thing to do. It is the only right thing to do. I love you. My door is always open. Send that message to your child and step back. And that's something that I teach about in the courses and things that I teach, my workshops, to understand why this is happening and what to do about it, and also what the Lord says about it. But what I'm going to explain first is why this is happening, because so many people haven't heard very much about it. When you and I were growing up, we're both over 40, 50.
Yeah.
And when we were growing up, trauma meant something extreme. Let's use an example of medical trauma as opposed to emotional or psychological trauma. In that case, medical trauma might be a gunshot to the chest, whereas the meaning has shifted over the last few years. Now, medically, it hasn't, but in emotional and psychological format, it now includes much more than it once did. And that includes things like a badly sprained ankle. And a badly sprained ankle and a gunshot to the chest are not in the same category. Yet in popular culture, in society, and especially on social media and podcasts and talk shows, they are. And because of that, anyone, anywhere has experienced some level of trauma based on that new definition. Well, they changed these rules, but they didn't tell us. The parents, the Gen X and boomers do not know that this changed. And so suddenly our child comes to us and tells us they've been abused. And they tell us that they are, that we are toxic. And they say things like boundaries and narcissistic, and they're going no contact, and they're cutting us off, and they don't want us in their lives, and we are to leave them alone because of the trauma they've been through, the trauma we've put them through. Now, in most cases where this happens, that is simply being an imperfect parent. How does that happen? How is there such a big disconnect? Well, it happens in a couple of different ways. One of them is blind spots. We have blind spots when we're driving. We also have them when we're parenting. What if your child comes to you at 1 a.m. and tells you, I'm thinking of taking my life? You're going to pay attention. But what if your child comes to you at 1 a.m. and says, Mom, I need to talk to you. I need you to come out to the living room and spend some time with me. No, seriously, Mom, I really need you. Honey, I know you're upset. You'll have more bandwidth in the morning emotionally. Just go to bed. I've got an important meeting at work in the morning. I just go to bed. We didn't know that they were at that crucial moment because they didn't tell us. For them, it was the ultimate rejection. When they most needed us in their life, we weren't there for them. They might not say anything. And that might just turn over and over in their mind and in their heart and grow and expand. And this is where it gets so important, is understanding what's happening and why. Because that child then takes that example experience and it grows in their brain. And each time they remember it, it grows a little bigger, kind of like those fish stories. How big was the fish you caught? Well, it really big. However, for your child, the experience is one of, that was really awful. I still feel pain over that. I feel rejection. And then their brain is going, because they believe that that was the case, their brain starts looking for evidence of that. Evidence in this experience and that experience. And their brain starts remembering their lifetime from this new perspective. Now, it's frequently triggered by something, and that can be a good therapist who's helping them go through past experiences to try to understand things, and suddenly it comes to the forefront and they really start to gnaw on it. It can be a bad therapist who hears about it and frequently, up to 40% of the time, well, 39% of the time, according to a study, therapists, especially the younger ones, listen to what the person is saying and take those words to heart as they are, hook, line, and sinker, and diagnoses the other person involved without ever meeting them. That's just horrible. But they don't do that every time. But they say words that push or recommend things instead of presenting options and letting the client choose. They recommend they do this. They recommend they do that. And that includes recommending they cut off a parent because they're toxic. So what does toxic mean? Well, toxic is defined by the mind of the user of the word. And it frequently is being used to say negative, complaining, speak badly about the other parent if there's been a divorce. It can mean that they are fault-finding or critical. Here's another one, and this one really takes people off guard. When a mom has her child leave home, does she stop being a mom when they grow up and move out? But she is no longer a mom to a child, not even a mom to a teen necessarily. She is a mom to an adult, an emerging adult perhaps, but to an adult. And if she doesn't learn to make that transition, then she risks damaging that relationship. An adult child who is treated the way a mother treated her teen and her children will feel smothered, will feel controlled and manipulated, and will feel a need for air and space and say, leave me alone. So sometimes this intuition of mothers to love, to protect, to reach out, to nurture, if anything's wrong, let me fix it. That is what makes things worse in a relationship. Another reason that moms are being rejected not just because the child says they're toxic, because the mother is over controlling or manipulative or just too involved in their child's life and not letting them live their own life, is when a mother is being a great mother, but the child hears words that other people have said. Just that one instance, one experience. And then they say, well, that's not exactly what I would have thought, but you're right. And that can come from the other parent if there's been a divorce. That's a big cause of them. It can come from a new boyfriend or spouse saying, it's me or them. Now, your child is in the leave and cleave stage. They're supposed to be getting out on their own lives and finding their new person and cleave to that person. Now, if they do that and they love that person with all their heart, if that person comes from a bad background, how are they going to look at a situation? They're going to have a very biased perspective. And that biased perspective can bleed into the relationship with your child. And they can say, oh, well, when we went there, this happened and this happened and this happened. And your child will be like, huh? And pretty soon as they start telling it, someone that they love and trust tells them this, then they are pulled in that direction. And they sometimes are put on the spot. In the very best of relationships, they are told it's me or them. And what does God command us? To cleave to our spouse. And so we go with our new spouse. Now, in my mind, it makes sense that if that new spouse is making a claim like that, then they're the one that's messed up. But if you've made that decision and committed to them, what do you do? So many children are leaving because of the words of a loved one, a new person in their life, a new community even. And there are many who refer to this as self-care, where they call cutting off your parents as self-care and finding your way, because they say, lose your parents, find your life. How sad is that? They don't want the voice in their head that tells them what to do right from wrong. They want to move forward and do their own life. And if they don't like what you said, then they're pulling away and calling foul. Unfortunately, a lot of that comes from not wanting to face responsibility or do the hard thing or work through things. It comes from wanting to blame someone else for the pain they're experiencing.
Yeah, that's certainly, Marit, a lot to consider, a lot to think about. And several things stood out, I think, while you were talking. And I would agree with you on what you shared. I think one of the things that we see is a nature of humans, unfortunately, is rebellion. And, the word addresses this, the Bible addresses this quite a bit about rebellious people. And it's kind of why people want to disown or discredit the Bible or reword it or reshape it, because they don't like what it shares with them in regards to their lifestyle or behavior or choices. That's what young adults or teenagers are being encouraged to do by this radical voice or this secular voice. If you don't like what you hear, then disown, claim freedom. And again, I see that as just an evil device of the evil one, trying to cause separation and divide and pulling people, in this case, young people, away from truth and from guidance that would help them in their life. So, yeah, I see that as an instrument trying to shape a population and discredit what you've been sharing in regards to parents' role. The other thing that came to me and why I think mothers really try so hard is mothers are so much more into relationship than dads. Dads are into teaching, training, and do this and responsibility, and we just assume relationship. Moms are in the business of making relationship ongoing and continuous. And so when things aren't going well, they see this as a challenge, I believe, to the relationship. And it's something that's causing, vulnerability to it. And they will do about anything in most cases to restore relationship.
That's right.
And, I get it. Because in business, one of the things I've often talked about is relationships more important than being right. And,
Yes.
you get arguments at tables and divides because people won't back down. And so what about relationship? Well, parents, particularly mothers, that is who they are, their relationship. And they, they're the glue that holds it all together. And so they get pulled into that, not realizing that they're weighing the role that they're to play or the effort they're supposed to give incorrectly. And
Right.
like you said, I love you and leave it and not do it for them. I've done a lot of parent education in my career as a psychologist. And I've often told parents, when you do for your child what they should be doing for themselves, you've not helped them. You've actually
Right.
started to create a disabling and a reflection that can't do it on their own. And so we've got to let them grow and change, and pain and suffering and disagreeing, all those things are part of growth and maturation and development. There's this message today from the secular side that let's make everything rosy. There should be no conflict, no disagreement. And you've got to make it smooth sailing for your kid, or you're not doing your role as a parent. And that is such
Right.
a false, deceitful message. A couple of other points that came to mind as you were talking in regards to memory and childhood memories. I've read the research, and there's as much as a third, if not more, of childhood memories that are actually false. When they've done the research and they've gone back and looked and tried to pave the way and prove, they've actually found out these events didn't happen. So now you take these percentage of false childhood memories, you present those to somebody that's going to be totally empathetic. And I refer to these people, I was one of them, really basically as a honeymoon stage relationship, or a dating relationship status. In other words, they're not in the real world daily with that child and that young person saying the no's and the yeses and dealing with things. They're in this honeymoon relationship where it's just, oh, it's good to see you today. How can I be a support? And they've got this glossy type thing that's not even real.
Right. Right.
So they're feeding into this information they're getting, buying it hook, line, and sinker, reinforcing it, some of it which isn't true, some of it which is distorted, and only some of it probably accurate. And then they're only getting one side of the story. But yet they're starting to give feedback and direction based on a very limited piece of sound knowledge.
Exactly. And that's something that I love to talk about, is the reframing of things, because I was on both sides. So I did this to one of my parents. And were there real problems? Oh, yeah, absolutely. There were real problems. And were people imperfect? Absolutely. We were all imperfect.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened was some people pointed out to me just how bad they were. And I listened to them. Was it true? Maybe a little, but I didn't need to dwell on it. And I did. And that allowed me, by dwelling on it, it became, I love neuroscience. I absolutely love learning how the brain works, because you mentioned the kids have rewritten their childhood. Parents rewrite the past as well. Sorry, a little tangent here. When I look back and I'm told I'm a terrible mother and my child wants nothing to do with me, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look back through my parenting years, and I'm going to see, was I a terrible mother? But I am looking for all of the loving things, all of the sacrifices, all the good things I did. That is what my brain is searching for on its own without my prompting it to. And I'm defending myself. And suddenly I've lived this glorious life, and I was a phenomenal parent. That doesn't mean mistakes weren't made, but I'm not seeing them, and I'm magnifying the good while they're magnifying the bad. So pretty soon, each time you go through these memories, you rewrite them based on the bias you are in at the moment. And pretty soon, our memories don't match at all. And that's not something that's the fault of the child, nor is it the fault of the mother. But the mother is the adult in the situation. And the mother is the one who needs to stand up and do what's right. Now, 1 in 4 men are separated from a child. There's 68 million Americans estimated estranged from a family member. And they say 1 in 4 fathers is estranged from a child. It's a much lower amount of women, but the women take it harder. I found that as I looked at my past, I saw the problems. And the more I looked, the more I found. And then I looked for that going forward. And so any interactions that we had, I looked for that in that parent. And I found it. I found it every time. And was it really there? Maybe a little. But I was magnifying it because that was my goal, was to find that. Not because it was happening, but because I wanted to vindicate myself and say, look, I was abused. This was a terrible situation. I was neglected. Here's the problem with that. My mother was as good a mother as you could have. My father was as good a father as you could have, according to the best of their abilities. But I chose one of those parents, and I pulled away. And I didn't close the door and cut them out forever. I moved away. I lived far away. I was cold to them and resentful, and I looked for their faults. And I know that they probably felt it a lot. But they handled it so gracefully. And eventually, I came to myself, like the prodigal son. I came to myself, and I came back. And my child did the same. Fortunately, God took care of them. But here's my miracle I want to share with you. I had been through difficult times in the past. It's kind of convoluted, so here we go. I had spent 18 months in bed, bedridden, broke, watching my new business go down the drain. And during that time, I could have given up. I could not care for myself. I couldn't care for my children. I couldn't even listen to them. But God was with me, and He supported me. And about 2 months in, I realized, man, this isn't going away anytime soon. And I had vowed in the past, I'd been through tough experiences in the past where I didn't turn to God and I refused to. And oh my goodness, at the end of that long, really excruciating trial, do you know what I got out of it? Nothing. No growth, no understanding, nothing. So the next time I went through a really big trial, I turned to God and I said, I'm going to be patient and I'm going to wait on your timing, because faith isn't just faith in God. It's also faith in His timing. And so I waited in His timing, and it took a long time, but it was worth the wait. And it was a struggle that really strengthened our family and our marriage. And as painful as it was, there were so many wonderful lessons learned. I learned to focus on the positive and find the good in everything. And when you're laying in bed and you don't know what you have for 18 months because they haven't discovered it yet, and you don't know if you're going to live or if you're going to get better, looking back was my option. And man, have I lived an incredible life. But until I stacked all the good things on top of each other, I hadn't noticed. Well, that's what happens when we are taking our train of thoughts, and that string of thoughts is stuck on a wheel, getting wrapped around the axle over and over, because our train of thoughts is not on positive, but is on negative, and it just stays there. And that is what the enemy tries to do to us and to our children.
Yeah.
So what happened for me was the children have to come to themselves. And when they do, then things can open up. But the mother has to be responsible for her own thoughts, her own healing, her own growth, and be prepared so that when the child returns, it doesn't become another brawl. It doesn't become another argument, because nobody wins an argument. But they are ready to receive that child, listen to that child's outburst of anger and frustration, and let it slide.
Right.
And once that child feels safe, that healing begins. And that parent can do that because they are strong on the inside and they are ready. And that's part of what I teach. But also, I teach the mothers how to process the experience and find their footing. Because there are some where the child never comes back. And if that's the case, you are going to understand through time that your worth was great before you had children. And your identity might be mother in your mind. You know, if you ask a man what he does, well, his identity is his career. Ask a mom what she does. It doesn't matter what her career is. Her identity inside in her heart is a mother. And we have to pull that aside because we are more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not the season for that.
Mm-hmm.
This may be a season of weeping. This may be a season of joy. And to some degree, that's our choice. But we are daughters of God, regardless of children. We are daughters of God. So helping mothers find that footing and learn to develop a deeper walk with Christ is remarkable. It's a wonderful opportunity that I get to work on. And my healing came this way. When my child walked out on me and cut me off, as well as their spouse and their children, all of my grandchildren. It was excruciating. One of them was born while we were estranged, right after they left, and I wasn't allowed to see photos, and I was angry at first because I knew I was right, and to some degree I was, mostly. But then what happened was a couple of days in, I went up to the guest room, and they had lived with us for a while, and I found a little Hot Wheels toy that had been left behind. And I could so clearly picture playing with one particular grandchild who was smitten with that toy. And I just collapsed on the floor. I was weeping uncontrollably in a way I never have in my life. I'm not a crier. And I lost it that day. And my pain was unbearable. But I prayed and I fasted, and a few days later, I finally prayed the words and I said, I don't know if I can handle this. God, will you carry this pain for me? And he did. From that point forward, it was a fact as much as we're having meatloaf for dinner or Tuesday night we have an appointment. It just was a thing. I didn't dwell on it. I wasn't going to push that. But the pain was gone. It was just a fact. I will see my grandchildren when they are adults or in the next life. But it's not mine now, and I'm going to move forward. And I found new purposes, and I found God-given direction and meaning, and it was an excruciating experience. But it wasn't until that pain lifted that I started looking inward and seeing all the faults I did have in my relationship with my child and making those changes. And that's when I was in a position where we could reunite, where it could heal. And when it was the right time, God brought it about. God was with my child the whole time, and he is with your child.
That's a vulnerable position you put yourself in as you share, and I appreciate that and respect that. And it's not easy. The dynamics are complex in relationships, and when things go awry, they become more complex, and then people get involved. It adds another layer of complexity. And then you add sometimes a level of inaccuracy and distortion and emotional response and all these kinds of things. And it continues to create more levels of difficulty and complexity. So it's not easy, but I would really encourage everyone out there to be thinking about it. The ultimate is relationships are the most important. How we go about restoring, though, and having those is important. Really, I think one word sums it all up. All the things that we need to do is a balanced approach, and the balanced approach comes from the Bible. So it includes forgiveness. It includes putting down pride. It includes making statements of our own mistakes. It includes accepting forgiveness from someone that made them towards me. All those things come into play. And if we can include those and get the defensiveness down, because defensiveness and the defense mechanisms do help protect us from the onslaught of what's coming in, but they can also prevent us from learning and healing and moving forward if we're shutting off anything that would help with resolution and working through. So we've got to be willing to be open and engage in conversations with people that we care about that are going to build that bridge and restore that relationship, put our own pride down. I think, helpers out there do a great job for the most part. I was one
Agreed.
for many, many,
Absolutely.
many, many years, but I really did work hard too at keeping things in perspective. And I remembered one thing always, and it's a kind of a postulate that I've always operated under, and that is for everything, it could be something else. And so what that caused me to do is be slow in formulating conclusion and always readily formulating hypotheses. So as I would listen, in other words, I wouldn't take what you shared as fact on scene, and just put it in cement. I would take it as your perception, your perspective, and as probably highly reliable, probably, hypothetically. But it didn't cause me to formulate then this concrete decision or conclusion about someone else until I had more information. I needed to have adequate information to formulate a conclusion because of
Right.
what we talked about earlier, the inconsistency, the distortions, and all those things. And I could give empathy and feedback and support to someone hurting without necessarily having to validate, the accuracy of what they're sharing, because what you're experiencing in the now, regardless of the accuracy. And so my empathy and my support is given to your experience and given to your present portrayal. It isn't necessary to the content or to the accuracy. It's to you as a person who's hurting. That's where we give
Right.
the empathy. And then information will be proven out or altered or changed down the road. Many of my diagnoses were either generalized or undifferentiated until I could formulate more of a hard conclusion on what was going on. It was very slow to jump at something on someone. Now, the medical
That's
model
so wise.
doesn't want us to be slow about it because they want to get it into the payer mix and they pay for it all. We know how all that works. So much of our system operates against really the way we operate as human beings. But I would encourage moms and dads to love, of course, seek relationship restoration, but also know boundaries, know what your role is, what you should do and not do, be open to what you should do and not do. Let's put down our barriers or guards or defensiveness, because ultimately relationships are most important, right? We know that because that's why God the Father has held off his son's return, because he wants to store a relationship with people that don't know him. Relationship is ultimate, but he also has very clear, concrete teachings and things that he tolerates and doesn't tolerate, and things that are good to do and not good to do. And that is life. And in our family systems, there's things that have played out that on all ends, it isn't just our kids' fault. It isn't the parents. Everybody contributes to how it got to where it got. But we also can contribute to resolution and restoration. And that's what we need to be focused on.
Yes, agreed. And I think it's really helpful for the moms to make sure not to get angry at their
Yes.
child
Yeah.
because it doesn't do any good. It's natural, but you don't have to stay angry. Let it out, let it go, and forgive them. Even if you never get an apology and you continue to get bad treatment, if you let that poison you, then you lose that love for them. Not for their sake, but for your own. Get rid of the anger. Because there are sources out there that are supposedly teaching how to do this and saying you have to write off your child and move forward. Well, that's not true. You don't write off your child. You move this relationship to the back burner. It's always there and it's always a part of you, and you just move forward. God will handle that, and God will handle your pain. And I think it's important to recognize, the Lord talks about, if thine eye offend thee, pluck it out. And he's talking about relationships. But what he's referring to there is if someone is keeping you from following the faith, that's when you pluck them out. If they are preventing you from following him and being a part of him, that's when you pluck it out. But when he talked about estrangement, it was to the prodigal son's father. The prodigal son's father did it right. His son wanted all of the money and he wanted it now. He probably didn't have a fully developed prefrontal cortex, but he wanted his money and he wanted to get out. What did the father do? He let him go. He knew it wasn't going to work out well because his son was young and too ambitious, and he let him go. And this is a story told by Jesus Christ himself. So we know that this is how to handle this type of estrangement. Let him go. He didn't send his servants after him to watch him. He didn't send his servants to bring him back. He didn't write lots of letters. He let him go to a far land.
Yeah,
And then when
often.
everything was gone there, while he was gone, what did the prodigal son's father do? He took the time to prepare. What he did was he waited and he watched. And he waited and he watched. Do you think he wasn't running his properties while he was waiting? No, he moved forward with his life. But he was watching and waiting while he was moving forward, keeping an eye to, an ear to the ground, if you will, and keeping his eyes open, but moving forward on his life, enjoying his other son until his son came to himself. And when his son came back, he was ready to not ask for an apology or demand one because his son was in the wrong. He'd been badly used. He didn't show anger. He came rejoicing because he had prepared his heart. He had kept the anger out of his heart. And what he did was he wrapped him in a robe and gave him a ring and threw a feast with the fatted calf. But
Right.
here's the thing to remember is that he was able to do that because he had prepared his heart. He was able to because he loved his son and was ready to let him choose his own way. And I think that's what Jesus wants us to do in our lives with our children, is to wait and loving, just let them know the door is open. If there's a way to reach out, let them know the door is open. It will always be open. And I love you. The end. Nothing more. And if you do that, they have nothing they can interpret as evidence against you. Apologies become, see, she's admitting it. Even if you're apologizing for something you didn't do, it's used as evidence against you. Almost anything you say will be used against you in their mind because their mind is in kind of a crisis mode. You don't have a chance to explain it from your perspective. It's not going to happen. So let them go, be quiet, and don't stop loving them. And when they come to themselves, then you can get your child back.
Yeah, I think those are excellent points. You're right. We know it from a psychological standpoint, too, that the more we push, the more resistance you get. And so it doesn't serve to lessen the gap. It actually increases the gap. And so you have to back off. It's those emotional kinds of things that we need to be able to own in ourselves so that because of our own pain as adults, don't try to restore something that only is going to serve to worsen it. I think, too, when you talk the story of the prodigal son, what happens when someone is restored and someone does come back and there is that restoration, those emotional elements have been put down. Okay, so pride is not a part of that. Openness is part of that. And a
That's right.
person is no longer trying to say, I'm right or you're right. They're just wanting to restore. And so we've got to put that down. And that's where I talk about relationships more important than being right. If a person has to hold on to that just to prove their point, then that becomes more important than the relationship. Then that relationship isn't going to face restoration. You know, I've made a statement in the past that we know that love covers a multitude of sins, as demonstrated by Jesus. And I've always said in parenting that relationship covers a multitude of mistakes. And we all make them as parents and child, as teacher and learner. And children make mistakes, teens make mistakes, and parents make mistakes. And so what I would say to that out there for listeners is that's okay. We are flawed creatures, don't have our act all together. We're still a person in progress. We're in the learning curve. We're still trying to learn and apply and become more like Christ and grow and develop in his wisdom and knowledge. And we've made mistakes and we'll continue to make them. But our Savior is here not just for the ones that we've made, but the ones that we will make. But we've got to put down our own blockages of emotional state in order to openly, with open arms, like the Father did, welcome home the prodigal. And if
That's
it's a
right.
child welcoming home the prodigal parent, the same thing. We've got to put that down. We can't let that be that barrier that will not allow us to bridge a relationship.
I love hearing this because all of this is in my course. It's so true.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I tell you what, I think we've been going almost an hour and we're going to kind of wrap this up. But I love what you've had to share. And so what I really need you to do now for our listeners is let them know how they can follow you, track you, what resources you have, because I have no doubt there's many out there that want to know more.
Well, I hope so, because it's an important topic, not just for the ones who are experiencing it, but frankly, for everyone, because the ones
Yeah.
that are experiencing it, they're hiding it. And 1 out of 15 or 20 women is going through this. You are not alone. People don't talk about it because they're ashamed. People don't talk about it because they're just not proud of it. But don't go through this alone. You don't have to. It's something that having that sense of community there will really help you get through it. If it's the right community, an uplifting one, not an angry one, and not one that's blaming, but one that will help you grow. And you can find that through my website at maritwelker.com. I have a workshop, I have downloads, I have a course. Then you can also find me on my podcast, which is still here, Estranged Christian Mothers, for Estranged Christian Mothers. I'm also on social media as Marit Welker or Marit Welker Speaker and Coach. So look me up. I'm here. I'm still here.
Yeah, I'm still
And
here.
I really really want to help any woman who have questions or concerns or fear, pain, because the answer is always in Christ. And finding that answer and finding our way through the things of the world to really get there and to get pulled in the direction He wants us to go, it's not easy. You don't have to do it alone.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really good. I certainly encourage our listeners to follow up. And you're right. This is not an uncommon issue or concern, and many are in the midst of these divides that really would benefit from what you have to offer. So I would encourage that follow up.
Thank you.
Marit, I really appreciate you being here today, and I appreciate your authenticity, your vulnerability, and certainly the words of wisdom that you've shared. You and I would align in that our resources come from God and from His Word, and they are fresh every morning, and they are new, and they are true. They are what I talk about as being reliable. They have proved themselves out, and they will continue to. And I appreciate that all your work is sourced in His truth. So thank you for being here. And for my listeners out there, I appreciate you tuning in today and following the Dr. T Show. I encourage you to check out my website, drtconsulting.org, where you will find out more information, free resources. You'll be able to see my book, Awaken, that was just released in December, as well as a free ebook called Peace Space, ready for you to download. So until next time, may God bless you, and may He be a light unto your path. May He help you discover and activate your voice with purpose. Dr. T out.